We are live now.
Sanskrit, you need to begin.
Yeah, sir. Hello, everybody. I'm Sanskrit Tripathi, and I'm a senior research assistant at CNES, and I would like to welcome every one of you to this second panel of our ISDS 2020 workshop on acclimatized emergencies. I would just quickly go into a brief outline as to what we are expecting out of this panel discussion. Well, while talking about the alarming environmental issues and questions of sustainable choices that help heal the environment, one must always have to deal with the two pillars of economy, that is the producers and the consumers. And we are looking to discuss the multifaceted aspects and linkages that are dealing in the consumption and production patterns, especially after the rise of globalization, with the social and environmental impact they incur on daily basis. It is shown in multiple studies that increasing choice-oriented consumption and excessive range of produce, origin of multiple folded increase in carbon footprint. And talking about industries such as producing industries, processed food industries, fashion industries, etc., we can see the rising consumerism and the race to keep up with the changing trends is giving a birth to problems like wastage of unused fine produce, overutilization of non-replenishable resources, improper waste disposal, and most importantly, the changing consumer-producer mindset. And thus, via this panel discussion, we are trying to bring up the issues of consumerism, dilemmas of sustainable choices, and producer consciousness to the larger debate, and establish the linkages that are present and needs constructive remedial changes. Now, I would like Tamanna to go ahead and introduce our panelists and faculty moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanskrita, and a very good afternoon to everybody, and a very warm welcome to this workshop edition. Now, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. Our first panelist for today is Ms. Kanika Pal, who is an award-winning CSR and sustainability professional with 15 years of experience. Ma'am holds a master's degree in CSR from the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. Having worked in corporations like Apollo Tyres, Sony Pictures Network, she is presently leading the Sustainable Community Development Program across South Asia, called Prabhat at the Hindustan Unilever Limited. A TEDx speaker, Ma'am quit the corporate sector from 2015 to 2017 and founded Solutions for Clean and Healthy Environment, or SOCH Foundation, to influence behavior change for a cleaner planet. She has a deep interest in exploring interconnectedness between conserving the environment, developing sustainable handicrafts, and enhancing livelihoods of artisans. As a change maker, Ma'am has worked with potters in Delhi and the less known artisans from the remote villages of Barmer, Rajasthan, wherein she honed their skills and showcased it at India Runway Week for 2 consecutive seasons. Soch Foundation also showcased these artisanal skills at other platforms. Furthermore, Ma'am has also worked with potters and co-created eco-kilns and achieved 75% reduction in air pollution and particulate matter related emissions in Delhi. For this, Ma'am has been awarded the most influential sustainability leader and Women Innovator citations in 2018, among others. Ma'am is also a lead fellow and alumnus of South Asia Leaders Program by Common Purpose UK, a part of EY Women Business Leaders Network and Al Gore's Climate Reality Leadership Corps, and also a member of USAID's SAWIE, which is South Asia Women in Energy. An avid potter, in her spare time, she likes to conduct pottery sessions, helping participants practice mindfulness while being reconnected with Earth. Ma'am, we warmly welcome you to our today's discussion. Our second panelist for today is Ms. Akanksha Kapoor. Passionate about health and sustainability, Akanksha Ma'am is the CEO of IC Organic, a New Delhi-based organic food company that works directly with farmers across the country to bring the most trusted and safest certified organic groceries to the customer's doorstep. Prior to taking on the CEO role at the company this year, Akanksha ma'am led marketing and retail for ISDS since 2014. Ma'am has completed a degree in marketing from Parsons, the New York School for Design, and holds an undergraduate degree in philosophy from Miranda House, Delhi University. Akanksha ma'am is also a graduate of the Executive Social Impact Strategy program at the University of Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, USA, and is a teaching fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. In 2018, to address the lack of preventive mental health care in education system of India, ma'am set up a small non-profit initiative called Minds at Play. We welcome you, ma'am. Our third panelist for today is Mr. Shubhav Duggal. Mr. Shubhav Duggal is the co-founder and COO at ULaunch, which is the media platform for social startups. He is an engineer whose work experience spans across fields like solar energy and information and communication technology in different capacities. Environment stability, sustainable development, social empowerment, and nation building are the broad goals towards which Sir wants to contribute his efforts to. Now, I would also like to introduce our faculty anchor for the session, Professor Ronita Chaudhary. Professor Chaudhary is the CEO and co-founder of Armadillo Digital, a creative agency and venture studio in New Delhi. She went on to receive a bachelor's in international politics from New York University. Ronita ma'am received her MSc in globalization and development with distinction from the Global Development Institute at the University of Manchester, UK. She started her career with Bank of America's Wealth Management Division and then went on to work with Mainstay Investment for 5 years. She has recently launched her own sustainable fashion brand called Trope, which is an online brand, and an educational entrepreneurship initiative called Girls Biz to get more young women in India to think about starting their own businesses. Currently, Professor Ronita is an assistant professor of practice and assistant dean at Startup JGU for the Jindal Global Business School. I warmly welcome all our esteemed panelists and our faculty anchor and all our guests. And we look forward to a fruitful and constructive conversation with all of you. And now I invite Professor Ronita Chaudhary to begin the panel discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Tamanna. That was we have quite a few interesting people on this panel to talk about sustainability today. You know, it's a very, very important topic. And the reason why we're even here is because, you know, India is in such a unique position where, you know, we're facing a lot of global challenges all at once and in one physical location, right? And so whether it's, you know, ecological damage or farming practices or livelihoods, women and girls empowerment, you know, a lot of these global issues, climate change, they're present here and we're all getting affected by it at the same time. And so, you know, whether to correct the wrongs of the past or how we look into the future, it's gonna be important that we work together with not only our environmental resources, but also with each other, right? And what does that look like for a consumer, an increasingly consumer economy? So I think, you know, with the panelists that we have today, I'm hoping for an engaging discussion to look at, you know, what is it that, you know, companies can do to push for more sustainable choices? What is it that government can do? What is it that consumers can do? And how do we look at the incentive structures that consumers have when it comes to making sustainable choices, right? So I think we're just gonna kick it off with Akanksha, who's had some, I mean, has helped build I Say Organic. And just for complete transparency, I do order from I Say Organic and I think their produce is amazing, but I have to be transparent about that. But you know, they've really worked on creating a supply chain from scratch as well as a consumer base. So Akanksha, I think to kick it off, I mean, do you think that the consumption side of sustainable practices is getting as much attention as the production side? And how can we persuade consumers to make better choices, right? Much more sustainable choices. What have you guys done? And then what do you think, what else can be done?
First of all, hi everyone. Hi Ronita. It's great to be connected here. And of course, I know you buy from IC Organic, being totally transparent here as well. We love having you as a consumer, as a customer. I'm also just going to jump straight in, and to answer your question, the short answer to that is yes. I mean, over the years, IC Organic started in 2012. And while the market still remains niche for sustainable choices, customers were choosing to buy, organic produce or cleaner alternatives, right? The market is niche. However, if I was to compare it to when we started in 2012 and what sort of conversations we were having with customers, it was more education based. It was more telling the customer what really organic is. Why do they need to choose or completely move to a sustainable practice of agriculture or sustainable choices for their living? Over the years, as the market is and the demand has grown, the conversations also have moved towards, we know what organic is, do you have this available, right? So the customer has become more aware. I think in general, right now in this environment, there's a lot of talk about sustainability, the impact that it has, conventional farming has on the environment. There's a lot of, the pandemic has actually restarted that conversation a lot as well, in terms of, okay, now is the time to make that change. So there's a lot more happening in this space, and the consumer is asking for a lot more in not just food, but across all categories. So whether it's your cleaning products, skincare, anything FMCG, I think customer is looking for that alternative now. And to get to your question about how do we persuade customers about the shift, I mean, there's one group of customers that is looking for that. And then there's the other customers that's convinced, but is still hesitating to make that shift. So the biggest point there is that in India and around the world, most diseases currently are lifestyle. And there is a direct correlation to the food people consume. So a very straightforward answer to that would be, if you invest in the food that you eat and if you invest in sustainable choices, it is a longer term impact on your health, on your medical bills. However, of course, we don't communicate it like that to our customers. I think it's more done in a manner where we're able to convince the customers that, this is a lifestyle choice that you're making. This is better for you, better for the environment, better for the farmer. And while there is that, and that's what helps us convince them to pay that 10 to 15% extra. And as a brand, it is also our goal that we bring that price range back to which is competitive, right? So from when we started to where we are now, we have been able to bring competitive market prices to conventional products as well for certain items. Of course, certain items still tend to be more expensive, but a lot of our products have started competing with market pricing as well. So it's only a matter of time where the more consumer demand will increase, we will be able to provide, better pricing for across categories as well. Ronita, you're on mute.
Just as a follow-up, maybe for our audience, when we're talking about sustainable life choices, right, lifestyle choices, you said, one part is food. What are some other choices that people could make to be, to live a little bit more sustainably? And what does that maybe even mean?
Yeah. That's actually a very good question. I think that means personally very different to a lot of people, whether it's sustainable food choices like, I talked about, but if I was to take a personal example here, one thing I realized to live more sustainably during the pandemic was that I honestly do not need more than 5 pair of clothing. And we end up, consuming so much more than we actually need. So I think understanding, for me, I think what sustainable choices is really means is understanding what your true really needs are and then making the best use of that, instead of just over consuming things that are available, because the market is available with multiple things, right? And simple steps, right? Whether it's reusing, not using single-use plastic, whether it's carrying your own tote bag to grocery stores. It's simple stuff like that that people can do to make small shifts in their lifestyle. And also defining for themselves, what is it that they truly need and what is it that they don't. I think that's like the first step towards wanting to live a sustainable lifestyle.
And just one more follow up on this, especially because this kind of, whether it's stereotype, whether it's true about, you know, organic or sustainable items being more expensive. I mean, you touched on it a bit that, you know, the prices have come down. But I mean, this is a question, do you lead, you know, if you have a wide socioeconomic range, as we do here in India, right? How do you decide, do you lead with price? Do you lead with the benefits of organic and sustainability? I mean, which of these tools do you use to convince, you know, customers that this is actually better for you and it's better for the farmers in our country itself?
So to convince the customers, it's not the price. Of course, at the end of the day, the price is going to make a big difference. But to convince the customer, it is truly communicating that what we are providing is a authentic, most trusted produce that a farmer can, that you can consume and you can put in your body. I think that's the first step. I think in an Indian consumer, what we've realized is that it's very difficult for an Indian consumer to trust because of the number of things that are available in the market. So to really know what is truly genuine. So that's where a lot of our communication comes from. And our communication at IC Organic focuses on bringing the most trusted and the most authentic produce to your doorstep. That's number one. With most customers who've already converted and are coming back to us on a regular basis, right? For them, price is not such a big issue, and not because they are, not because they can really afford it. It's actually a conscious decision that they are making for their health. We've had multiple conversations with and surveys with our, you know, regular customers who may not necessarily be the highest, you know, from the highest socioeconomic background, but it's a choice that they're making. They're investing in their health by choosing organic produce, which is great, which is a great thing to hear because, you know, people realize the benefits of it. And again, like, of course, there's a farmer side to it, right? It's better for the land, it's better for the farmers as well. And again, like our own model, we work directly with the farmers that you're obviously already aware of. So price is a factor, but we don't push the price as much as to the customer. But of course, from a business perspective, we have to make it viable. We are a for-profit business at the end of the day, so we have to work on numbers that make sense for us to, you know, run the business at.
Great, thanks, Akanksha. I think on this, you know, on this topic of communicating, right? Like, what do you communicate with customers? You know, the internal organization may operate a certain way, but the communication to the consumers is incredibly key as we grow awareness and education for sustainable life choices and better life choices. Subhav, I'm going to bring you into the conversation on this. I know that Launch is doing some fantastic and interesting work. And, you know, Nimrod, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, Launch, but then also, you know, what are some different advertising, PR, social media kind of campaigns to help customers and consumers make better sustainable lifestyle choices?
Right. Okay. So first of all, thank you for having me here. And it's so much, I mean, you know, it's so much, it feels so exciting to know about all the latest developments that are happening here. So that is there. And now coming on to the question that is about, you know, how the communication takes place. So obviously the entire communication spectrum that is there, from advertising, branding, PR, you know, corporate communication. So we know how much it takes the lion's share of any firm. It is a major chunk of the resource allocation for any firm. So that is there, and we have seen some very successful campaigns. However, when it comes, we bring sustainability into the equation. I think it can be categorized into two major verticals that can be there. So first are the established, you know, the firms that have quite a huge market share, right? Those have been established for decades, and some of them are even here for centuries, right? So that is it. And then other emergent players, the new players, the new startups that have been there for the past 5-10 years. So both of them have taken to different methodologies for bringing out sustainability into the equation. So I think the primary thing that we have observed is about the emergence of sustainable advertising. They try to bring the green factor into the equation. They go for green messaging, right? So that is, I think, one of the things that has taken place. So of course you would have seen on the PET bottles that we should recycle it or throw it in the dustbin. So these sort of subtle messaging is there. Then there is go green, save electricity, that have become quite ubiquitous. And but now lately, because of the higher emphasis and the consumer consciousness, as has been mentioned by Akanksha as well, so now companies are going a step further. So we have seen recent initiatives about how sustainable packaging is being brought about, and I think it is a very, very it is it's the need of the hour, because we know how a big a problem the ocean plastic patch has become, and again there are some issues regarding that as well, how it is being tackled. So there is sustainable packaging. There's, of course, there is this sustainable cutlery, about how if you are ordering these days, so they are giving the wooden cutlery. So there is that and some of the companies are tweaking other things as well. And there is one other development that has taken place known as Alliance to End Plastic Waste. It is again like the bigger firms have come forward and they are trying to devise solution to the plastic problem that is there. So I think these are some of the major developments that have taken place. However, if we see on a macro view, from a macro perspective, like I being an average person, and if I consume traditional media, say the TV ads, newspapers, billboards, so we should ask ourselves, have we come across any truly sustainable product that is out there? Or do we see any of the major firms marketing or focusing on it, going it in the overdrive to that say that, yes, this is the ultimate sustainable choice? You would get the answer. I think that is a major thing that is missing, at least from the Indian scenario. I can't comment about the outside world, but at least from the Indian thing and the Indian corporate sector, I feel this is something missing. That sustainable products are not being advertised or given the required airtime that they used to. So that is there. And of course, the companies with having deep pockets and they're having the resources can bring about real-time change, real change on the ground. But it requires shift from the conventional form of, the circular economy term that we use, from redesigning to everything needs to be actually realized, and they need to reimagine if they want to realize true sustainability over the years. And that is not easy because they have, because of their sheer size, they have the inertia. And because their processes have been shaped over years and decades, all the processes, right, from designing, manufacturing to evaluating. So that is there. So I think that is it.
And just to follow up on this, so in terms of things like the sustainable packaging and the wooden forks and spoons, Akanksha, if you have some thoughts on this too. My question is, how much is that consumer driven, like consumers demanding it, like we want sustainable packaging, we want this, versus is it the companies or restaurants or someone else actually dictating, like, hey, we should have this, and so we're going to give it to the consumers whether they want sustainable packaging or not? And how does that then, change the incentives? How does it adapt? Or, are consumers kind of passively becoming sustainable?
I think both the ends are trying to, raise awareness. Consumers, sometimes it's the consumer that gives the feedback to the companies that you should include it. And that's why if the companies have some, compassionate decision makers, so they'll make the change, right? And sometimes it's the companies that are, pushing for it, and especially the new emergent players, because as I had mentioned, the category of new emergent players, right? So they are more adaptable. They can make the change rapidly because they are not bogged down by the inertia. So, but of course that lacks the visibility because of the resource constraint that is there. Not, because it requires resources to go, say on the TV advertisements or the newspaper advertisements and things like that for the mass media. But then they are trying to adapt. They are making use of social media. They are building online presence. They are highly utilizing e-commerce platforms and aggregators. So they are just trying to increase the awareness by it. So that is it. And there is one interesting factor, if I would can comment on it, about how sustainability is being being brought into vogue. You would have heard about Nike and Adidas. They have come up with a range of shoes made from recycled plastic, recycled material. So they are trying to increase the coolness quotient and the trying to bring sustainability into vogue. So that is there. And so I think some of these things are being done. And
yeah,
if Akanksha would like to comment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to add to your initial question, and rightly how Subhav also said that I think it's a mix of both. It is consumer driven, largely at least. And in our case, I mean, we started as a sustainable organic brand. So anything that we put out had to be the most sustainable, because that's the ethos and the ideology of the organization. At the same time, unfortunately, in a business like food, what ends up happening is that available options are very limited at the moment in India. There are organizations that are coming up with alternatives to, say, plastic packs that your lentils, grains, etc. can be packed in, but the consumer also demands higher shelf life products. So if I do pack some of these products in a paper bag, they will go bad way sooner than something that is packed in a Ziploc plastic pouch, which can be reused, right? The products also have to be flushed with nitrogen and vacuum packed, so insects, etc., don't grow in these products. So there's a lot of, issues that surround like fully going sustainable, right? Especially if you're in the home delivery and a packaged products, which is sitting on shelves for a very long time. So while we try to be as sustainable as possible, there are a lot of issues we face where going 100% paper or 100% a cloth based. There are alternatives that are coming in the market which are slightly on the pricier side. So that means overall the product might go become more expensive, which we have started looking into. So as and when new suppliers for this are coming in, we have started having those conversations. But coming from a consumer perspective, a lot of our customers demand that do not cling film my fresh produce. Make sure I only get produce, not even in paper bags, just leave it loose outside the house. Give me an extra paper bag, give me an extra, tote bag. So there are conversations driven from the consumer also. So while we are very conscious of bringing these changes into our organization on our own, we constantly have these conversations with our customers as well, on our own, as well as direct, like they reach out saying that please make this change, or when will you make this change? So it is a mix of two. I think a company will only be successful when they get good feedback from the customer, and then automatically and in our ethos we have that. So I don't think there is which is more. I think it has to go hand in hand. But the consumer 100% is getting more and more conscious. Especially if they're a regular customer in this space, they are very, very conscious of what they're feeding in, what they're taking inside their homes.
Yeah, there is this thoughtfulness that's coming into, maybe the older generation before didn't have that level of thoughtfulness, exactly like what kind of bag am I using? Where is it? What are the choices, the proactive choices I'm making? So yeah, to continue on this, I mean, the nature of how even produce is being bought nowadays is very different from the past, right? You have supermarket chains, you have delivery to your house. And so, I mean, how do we look at the sustainability of, say, for instance, food, right? And what role do you think that technology also plays in this to create at least business models that are more sustainable when it comes to food wastages or utilization of resources, etc.?
It's actually a really good question. And I think it's sort of like two folds, right? Like food waste has to be looked at from the organization or a supermarket, like you said, perspective, as well as the consumer side. So there is a change in consumer behavior that we need to do. And from a supermarket's perspective, there are regulations or systems that they need to put in place that will help drive that change in the customer as well. So say there is a very big new supermarket coming up in the city. If that supermarket is equipped with, bring your own bag. The messaging is everywhere in this space. As soon as you enter, there are machines that help you like return your glass bottles. There are systems that they've put in place that already help, facilitate that. I think automatically the change in a consumer behavior will start happening. Like the thought of, okay, let me not throw my glass bottles away. Like, I'll take this back to the supermarket. I think that will start coming about slowly. I think from the government perspective, if a supermarket change is coming up, if there are just regulations in place that, to start a company like that, these are some things that you need to do. Otherwise you can't set up a supermarket. I think all of this like sort of goes hand in hand according to me. And yeah, and when it comes to food waste, I mean, there was this huge, ugly food marketing that happened abroad in Denmark, I believe. And if something like that starts happening, I think the biggest thing you see here in a customer is that they want very beautiful looking produce. And the thing is, if it is not so good looking, that does not mean that it's not consumable. So if both organizations and if organizations can create a space where either they can educate through, various online marketing platforms, right? Educate the customer on how to use that produce. At the same time, work with their produce to develop more products from it, right? So using their not so good looking produce that may not sell to develop something using that particular product. I think, and further develop that into a product that they can push to the customer again. I think that would really help run that chain. Right? And how technology will play a part. I'm a very non-user of too much technology other than like apps and websites. So I think it's only a matter of time where there's going to be more machineries available to utilize these things a lot more, right? I mean, if I was to just take a very wild guess there, but a lot of
more like it's organic. I mean, you do have online ordering and delivery, and I'm guessing, not to give away too many trade secrets or anything, but like, does that change, say, for instance, how much you order versus like a supermarket that's gonna order tons and tons and tons, and then it just sits there waiting for people to come?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Yeah. We actually have an offline store as well. So I think the wastage that comes from a store is way higher than what you would incur in a online and a technology-driven model. Only because you're not necessarily showcasing products to the customer. And a lot of times what happens is that a customer coming into the store is going to pick and choose what they buy, like I was talking about it earlier. And on the website, we decide which is the product that should go to the customer. So, I mean, technology definitely helps reduce, forecast better, reduce the amount of the transit time also. Decide what is it that's going to go to the customer and how it's going to go to the customer. And in overall time also, I mean, the customer is saving so much more time in like walking to the store and it's just getting delivered. So it's the convenience that I think the online technology model creates for the overall customer. At the same time, I think while tech can really solve a lot of your wastage issues, at the same time, how much packaging will you use to deliver the product to the customer? That's something every organization needs to be very mindful of, right? Because if a customer is ordering one bottle of something, now how are you sending that one bottle? That's going to go in a crate, that's going to get wrapped up in a paper bag. All of those things need to be very taken into consideration. So it's, I think it's both ways. I think offline stores can create a model where things are returned in a manner which is less wasteful, and online at the same time they're delivered in a manner where it's less wasteful.
Okay. Subhav, I have a question for you. In regards to marketing strategies, there has, and I'd say this is really a question on the role of social media in increasing sustainable organic choices. hashtags that popularize, making sustainable choices or what's going on out there. As a marketing strategy to get more consumers on board to popularize the norms around sustainable consumption. I mean, what are things that are working, and then what are things that are not or have not?
Right. Okay. So yeah, I mean, again, it depends on the industry and the products that we are, talking about. So what is needed definitely is a mission mode approach, to go, in a multi-pronged manner, which is tailored according to the industry and the products that we are dealing with, right? So of course it is, online presence and online, social media does play a critical role, which I'll come to. But, it is before coming about the marketing, there have been cases, about the products that are supposed, which offer the better choice, right? Which offer the better choice, they need to be, of a high utility for the customer. Plus, they need, some of these aspects have to be taken care of, that they are, at par with the in performance and convenience. Convenience is a major thing when it comes to sustainability, because sometimes it happens that, customer psyche is such that they believe that the sustainable product, it's not convenient for me, or I have to go do my extra bit, right? So that is there. And, we cannot expect everyone to go for the difficult choice, the better choice. Everyone cannot be expected, because it's not just a question about awareness, but there are multiple factors that come into play. So while devising the marketing strategy for it and, all these things, so I think entrepreneurs and some of these social change, the people who work on the ground, they have concluded and they have come up with the thing that bring about behavioral and habits that have been formed. That is the behavioral change is the toughest part, the attitudinal change, to see what works for the customer. That is, I think, hands down one of the biggest things that, that is a major barrier to actually induce a positive habit. That being said, as has been mentioned previously as well, the consumer awareness is definitely increasing. But for other bunch, the larger chunk, the common person, there need to be some material and tangible incentives, either in the form of offers, discounts, some sort of, at least in the initial part of things, which need to be offered to make them, to go for the other choice, right? The better choice. So such things, some incentives needs to be there. And coming to the power of internet, we all know that, it's boundless. We can reach any amount of audience at a relatively economical manner. And, it's easy to make inroads by it compared to the traditional marketing, how things had been, billboards, as I had mentioned earlier, like billboards and newspaper advertisements. So of course, the digital age offers many, has many pros. And what works on the social media, there are things on the trends we are quite familiar with. So I think a couple of years back, there used to be this ice bucket challenge. So these things quite, get quite trendy. People do adapt it. They might not know the underlying cause for the same ice bucket challenge, but they will do it just for the sake of it, or for the fun part of it. And very recently, this Baba Ka Dhaba, about how the old couple is being helped by the people. So, these things are the positive power of internet is there. But I think the main problem that comes with it is that, it is short-lived. Such movements do get fizzled out quite quickly. So that is one of the major problems that is there, with the online thing. That's why some material incentives need to be complemented with the same. And I think the role that we have also envisaged at ULaunch and some of the other new age media platforms that are there, like say Better India or Your Story. So we are trying to showcase how fellow human beings, how fellow citizens have thought about an idea and how they have implemented it, and they're benefiting everyone. It could be the people, the other life forms, and the environment. So, there has been this thing about positive news. We know how news can be negative at times, right? So to bring about that change, to shift towards the positive side of things. So that's why we started ULaunch as well, to showcase how innovation can truly drive, and social entrepreneurship can truly drive positive change and solve multiple issues that are there in the environment. So I think there is a lot of work that is being done.
Yes, absolutely. This idea of material incentives is interesting. What is there material incentives beyond price, or discounts or those kind of things? Like, I'm just asking. I don't even know, but
okay.
What could be material? What other things could be material incentives to help people make the choices?
For India, right? I get it. In the Indian scenario, I think price remains the make or break factor. especially for the Indian, average Indian consumer, price remains the most critical factor. So definitely if the money part of things can be realized, and it has been done. I mean, we have covered some of the initiatives that have brought about sustainable products at the same, more or less the same price bracket, or some have even realized even lower price to the conventional or the traditional products that are there. So that has been done, but I think money remains one of the critical factor to change the, to bring about positive change and for the customer to adapt. And if the product is giving, as I mentioned, that the product gives the same type of performance and is hassle free, is convenient for him or her, I think they can make the switch then, if the price range is more or less same.
This is a question to both of you. I mean, what about like virtue signaling around sustainability and organic? This idea that on social media, even that, consumers do want, or, people will want to show that, hey, I'm making sustainable choices. Here's, I bought this from here, I bought this from that. Look, I'm making these choices, I'm being thoughtful. I know this can sometimes, I've seen this in the States happen quite a bit. People kind of like roll their eyes to it, but I mean, do you think that plays in anywhere here?
It can have a limited impact, I believe. And it does have a limited impact, but as you had mentioned, that people roll their eyes to it. People do see it as a holier than thou approach. So those things come into play, and I think it becomes quite subjective. I mean, it might work for some, it might not work for others. So I believe that is the same, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think I agree with Subhav there. It works for some people and it doesn't for some. And also, other than just like the price incentive, right? It's also that feel good factor. How are you making your customer feel really good? And how does your product make them feel? So it's your marketing strategy, but also your communication strategy. What is the name of your product? What is the description of your product? How are you marketing it on your social media? What is the language you're using? I think all of that now plays a very key role. And even in like, if you select like 5 influencers or 5 like social media marketers who you send your products to, how are they going to communicate your product? Who are these people that you select? Do they even fit your brand to talk about your product? I think all of that makes a big difference. And if it's done in a very strategic and a very smart way, I think it can really impact the business. I mean, the whole idea is that, okay, today I receive I think a very simple example would be any beauty product, right? Like all women invest in beauty products, and it's because how it makes them feel. And its whole thing around chemical-free beauty products, natural, no animal testing. It's like this big, space at this point, and just the way the product is, the description on a product is written, makes you buy. Right? Like just think of the last lipstick we bought. It's probably because of the way it was described, the way it was visualized. So I think all of that plays a big role now. Maybe not so much earlier, but it's really, really coming back in terms of, okay, a customer really, I think we apply the same philosophy when we place our products in retail stores also, right? Like why will a customer who will walk into a Modern Bazaar or a La Marche pick up my product, my apple cider vinegar over everybody else's? So I think brands need to start thinking from that perspective as well. That are they communicating, and use that as a power to communicate their angle of sustainability and the importance of it to educate the customer.
I think I like to cite one example here about the thing that you mentioned. So, among the organizations that we had covered, and there is this Shakti Stellar Energy, which is based in Madhya Pradesh. So what they do is that they, provide off-grid solutions, solar energy solutions for the homes, and they are, focusing on decentralized individual household is what they are making, entirely in the form of renewable energy. They are also providing the same for the biogas units that they provide. So they have done this interesting thing where, they give whoever the households that install the, go to the eco-friendly option or go for the renewable energy, the solar, who install the solar grid. So they give them a plate to be placed outside, at the nameplate of the house that says that this house has gone green, or, it is using solar energy. So I think these sort of things can be done, which fall in line with the same thing as mentioned about feel good factor and promoting a green message. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the same lines, I think in food, people now want to know, and consumer also wants to know, where is it coming from, who the farmer is, where is the farmland, what is that connect between farm to table. So I think these things really do make a difference.
And I mean, what do you guys think as far as like the role of the government in all of this? Whether it's pushing companies, like as you mentioned, Akanta, the government had policies saying that, you need to start a certain way that has sustainable practices built in. It leads to different outcomes. So, I mean, with our current scenario with how things are, whether on the consumer side, government policies to push consumers to choose certain things, or government policies to push companies to do certain things. I mean, what do you guys think about where it is currently? Is enough being done? Or what else could be done, right?
Okay, like if I would have to say, I think government is doing a lot of things. It is trying to build an ecosystem. It is trying to be an enabler for to drive the entrepreneurial spirit of the Indian citizen. It is trying to harness it, and it is trying to channelize it in a positive manner. So of course things have been there, and the government is trying to provide an entire infrastructure and as the ecosystem approach, and it has been trying to bring about various schemes, be it say Atal Innovation Mission, and some for the for skilling, for all these sort of things. There have been many schemes and policies that are being driven and trying to connect, and there has been, I can like to cite the example of GEM, the government e-marketplace, where for the entire supplies of the government, say stationery and whatever, the procurement that the government does. So it has built an online system where people can, and they promote women over there. I mean, in the sense that they have allocated some certain share that only women entrepreneurs can assign to, supply this much order. So they are trying to do these things. But where the disconnect appears is at times when the implementation part of it comes into place. I think that is one of the significant things which either make or break, some of the successful schemes that have been there. So if the implementation is being done diligently, if the accountancy is being, the people are being held accountable, I think then a lot of things are being done by the government, and there is scope for more. And to address the various interlinked issues, especially about environment, and to address the interlinked issues that arise because of not pursuing sustainability. So there are such things.
Yeah, I mean, just adding, I think the implementation is where there's a lack. And of course, I feel like there can be more, if we just look at sustainability from the perspective of sustainability, right? Like, how can we drive more change in consumer behavior or brand behavior, right? I think the governments can be more involved in setting regulations for organizations that work in this space. There's, of course, already a lot of organizations that regulate a lot of the practices. But in terms of communicating that further to the customer, how aware can the customer be made by the communication that's coming from the government? And from a brand's perspective or an organization's perspective, I think if there can be some sort of reward system set up by governments, or incentives by the government for organizations to run more sustainably, like access to low interest capital, just so that there is just more economic feasibility for an organization to want to run in a more sustainable manner as well. So I think there can be a bigger collaboration done in that space, which I think is pending at this point. I mean,
a more consultative approach,
Yeah.
broad-based consultation process. I think that can make a large difference.
I mean, do you see scope for these kind of changes, or this idea of like development and, moving the economy forward is going to take kind of lead in a lot of these things?
I think.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, like, are you trying to say, like, is it the development versus environment debate, or are you asking on those lines, or?
Basically.
Okay.
Okay.
So there is this one interesting thing that I would like to highlight, which has by World Economic Forum, the latest global assessment, the global risk assessment report that was brought about in 2020, which claims for the first time that the biggest risk to businesses these days is going to be the impact of climate change. Like, in all likelihood, for the businesses themselves, Like if they pursue the path of development that has been shaped over past, like, past 2-3 centuries, if they tread the same path, then they are themselves doomed to be, doomed to be failed. So that is the case. I think that's why they need to balance it out. They, the kind of view that was there, that we just need to extract from the nature. It's just a resource provided from which needs to be extracted and harnessed. I think that approach definitely needs to change. We need to be more, empathetic. We need to be more compassionate. And some of the values that was perhaps in the Indian school, or perhaps the Asian school in general, the Asian way or the Indian way of living, I think if some of those elements can be ingrained and promoted and be, made cool and brought into vogue, I think they can make a lot of difference. To have respect for the nature, and then build about debates and implement ideas, and try to bring it in a fast paced, in a mission mode approach, rather than doing it in a business and as usual thing. So I think there is a lot of scope that can be there, and balance and equilibrium should be there between development and environment. On to you, Akanksha.
I completely agree. There has to be a balance, and there's a lot of scope, of course, and there's a lot of, I'm a very positive person, so I always hope for the best, but things are moving slightly slower, in my opinion, than they should be. I think the pace of things need to increase. I think there needs to be a more aggressive approach from key stakeholders in this space, whether it's government, whether it's organizations like ours, whether it's advocacy, people in advocacy. I think there just needs to be a lot more just more aggression and more work happening in this space at a faster pace. Otherwise, I think, I mean, if we are talking about climate change, we are seeing the impact of it, and it is going to, take over very soon. So from an organization, I think, while I think it's very, very pleasant for me to see so many other organizations in the sustainability space across all categories, right? Across FMCG, skincare, beauty, home, education. There's so much happening in this space, but I think a bigger dialogue needs to happen together, and a more collaborated approach needs to happen. I think a lot of people are working in their own space, in their own silos, in their own bubble, but there's not too much collaborations happening, and I think that's what we need to work towards.
Very true.
Kind of lastly on this, we have a few questions coming in. I mean, what are your thoughts about sustainability? I want to frame this correctly. Sustainability outside the urban centers, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on rural India and their relationship with sustainability? And it's, maybe it's in a different form, actually, that's maybe more inherent to a certain cultural or regional sort of lifestyle. But, are we seeing kind of like a boomerang effect where, there was this older way, Asian way of being more connected to nature. Now, urban centers kind of moved away from that, but now are trying to get that back, and that then kind of falling back to, the rural areas, the, tier 3, 4, 5 cities, and then them kind of reinvigorating. I mean, I guess the question is, how are you seeing the dynamic between the urban and rural in regards to sustainable lifestyle choices, organic food, etc.?
Okay. So, like, if I get it correctly, see, I believe that, and that is what what the data shows, and the research that happens. So most of the rural way of living is sustainable to a large extent. It is sustainable, and that's why I think it is most significantly reflected in the fact that we see the ecological footprint. I mean, the report that is there. So it cites how the West, some of the developed nations, if all the people, or the 8 billion people living in the world, start living their way of life in their manner, so it would require more than 5 Earths. Whereas if everyone starts living the average Indian way, so it would require 0.7 Earths. So I think these are largely on a broader perspective, the rural way of living is largely in sync with nature. It is sustainable, and of course they should try to minimize the blind aping and just copying the methods of the urban elites, who they think, and which the Indian urban elites do for the first world countries, right? So we need to be very conscious about what we are adopting. and how we can address multiple issues, because we know how the rural India can be, how the news has been for there, and it has been in a disarray, and it requires jobs. It requires, people need to be skilled. The divide that has appeared across the rural and urban, the divide that is there, that needs to be closed down. And I think there is a lot of scope if we try to go the ecological way, the sustainable way. I think many problems can be addressed, and it holds a lot of rural India, at least. I mean, I believe it holds a lot of potential to drive the growth for the Indian GDP.
Akanksha, I mean, what do you think on this? I mean, it's interesting because I do feel that, ISA Organic is making inroads on more indigenous, food, millets, grains, vegetables, all of that.
Yeah, so I mean, one of our messaging is that we need to start eating and consuming things the way our grandparents' generation used to, right? I mean, that is one of the most commonly used phrases in the food space, that the kind of food that we are consuming, have started consuming right now is just not in sync with nature. So we have to go back to the older practices. And if you do go into the rural parts of India, you are going to find that people are still living in that, the way people are living in sync with nature, which is what is really needed in the urban cities as well. At the same time, I think what would be interesting is to see how much of people who from rural India who move into urban cities are really sticking with that sort of a lifestyle, right? So it's important to make sure that all the knowledge that comes from, ancient times and what is in sync with how food is used to be produced, I think a lot of that needs to be conserved, and there needs to be a lot of more work happening, communications happening in the rural space also, that doesn't get lost. So people need to be working very closely with these artisans and these farmers and people from the rural India to make sure none of their practices die, and it continues and flows into and only grows. So it creates the impact that it has. Because I personally feel, I mean, India has like you just mentioned, millets, right? Millets are what quinoa is to the international world, and a lot more nutritious, a lot better, and grown vastly in India. So I think it's only about educating the customer and educating people from every space that, this is what you need to bring into your diet. This is what you need to bring into your homes, not just food. If you think beyond food, from our knowledge that we have, and everything exists here. It's only a matter of taking it further.
About, that was an interesting point you brought up, Subha, especially on this idea of, you hinted at this idea of what's aspirational, right? And it's, I think, one way to kind of get consumers to make better lifestyle choices, make things that are better for the natural environment and livelihood, is to make a sustainable lifestyle something to aspire towards, right? In whichever form it is, whether it is how you, live in your smaller town and the practices that you have, that's not something to leave behind and just, disregard and take on a whole new, I don't know, urban Western kind of lifestyle, but actually have it reformed into an aspirational way of living, right? And that, the millets that we have, the indigenous food, variety, all of that also becomes something that is treasured and not as, old-fashioned or backwards or whatever it might be.
Right. And I think we lose a lot if we lose out, the cultural heritage that India has inherited from its ancestors. I mean, because of the, this sort of the inferiority complex that gets, included in the psyche, that we are not making as much as the person living in the city, and we are, just going to the dogs. So that sort of that, and we are not able to do anything productive. just because we are not able to, sit in front of the computer and, try to write codes and become a software engineer. So are you getting my point? That sort of, and if these people start losing and they do not do the handicrafts, they do not, if they just stop doing it because they are not making money out of it, or they are not able to earn a livelihood, not even making money, just to sustain themselves, I think India will lose a lot of intangible cultural heritage. And I think some of the organizations, I know some of the organizations that are working it and are trying to support the artisans. They are trying to bring back the cultural heritage that India has. And there's a lot of work being done. There's a lot of work being done. I mean, the one that we had covered in the about how they are, generating employment for the women in the rural areas, and how they are coming up with very, fashionable handy bags about with clothes. So, all these sort of things in which, and they are mostly spread across the North Indian states. So they are working for the women, and they are, providing the market linkages. They are taking their produce to the urban centers. So things like that. So there is a lot of work that is being going on in the rural areas, which needs to be, of course, scaled up for the holistic, to give them the Atmanirbharta, as I mean, our respected Prime Minister had said. So these are the things that are there.
So we have a couple of questions from Dipanshu. I'm going to bring you in.
Yeah, just a second. All right. I mean, this has been. Thank you so much, Ronita, Akansha, and Subhav. There's just been glued listening to. I mean, I would say you've covered a number of points that, and I think going beyond the set of questions that I think students had looked upon, and I think this is great, because what it does is it gives us a lot to not only think about, but as an academic. I was just, going from one cycle of thought to another, and I just wanted to, if possible, just take, with the permission of the anchor, Ronita, just a couple of minutes just to reflect a little bit and making sense of what all of you were saying, and I think. There were, in the way I was probably understanding, there were 6 key elements to the conversation that was happening around, let's say, the broader theme of sustainability in thought and practice, in consciousness. I mean, the very idea of consciousness goes far beyond what the intellectual pursuits of the mind may look at, but creating a sense of what Akansha said, how you make a person feel, right, is a product of what they not only see, but how they understand your own conduct as a person providing a service or providing a good makes the person feel like. So I think there are these 6 points that I got an idea about, and just to kind of look at it, one was looking largely at incorporating consumer feedback on the changes that they are seeing in different areas, particularly FMCG, textile. I'm seeing a lot of that as a space. Medical, given the fact that the pandemic, there's a positive externality seen on areas of telemedicine and a lot of other areas. So there is definitely a space there for corporations and particularly startups to explore. But the second point, which was very interesting, was on narrative-based advertising. If I was able to understand on the use of stories as a way of expanding that consciousness, and I think that's a point which we were trying to grapple and understand at the time when there was this discussion happening on how to go about looking at this particular theme. That how does a corporation or a startup actually start by creating a sense of image where a consumer feels, well, I want a bite of that. It might be a McDonald's burger, but if it's a veg patty that is created in a manner that is seen as more ecologically more sensitive, they want to get a bite of it. And the other was this aspect around material incentive structures. What kind of incentives are corporations providing? I think that's a broad key area for one to look at. But I want to look at these last 3 points, which I think Ronita picked up and quite intuitively on lifestyle choices, aspirational structures, and creating value. In looking at the creation of value beyond, let's say, an urban spatial dynamic. So expanding the sense of a conversation around sustainability way beyond, I think, just because most of the consumers, if you really look at the potential market, are based out in the rural area. And to be honest, they have, if you really engage, people have a far, better idea of how much of consumption is, let's say, enough. Let's say the point on satiation of consumer as against a compulsive need to buy. And I don't have the statistics, but the way I see and observe is that an increasing amount of buying in certain sectors is happening more compulsively than consciously. And I think that is triggering. In fact, it's in the interests of the financiers to really encourage that. And that's what we've seen in the US and a lot of other markets. But in the Indian context, it's very interesting that we have we have almost a social cultural break, which puts a check on our consumption patterns. And I think that is a very interesting aspect to look at. The question I wanted to ask for our panelists is so the first thing is, how do we create this idea of progress or the image of progress that is so essential to the way, a particular individual thinks about whether it is an activity of production, consumption, distribution. If I'm sitting, actually, to be very honest, we are based out a few hours away from Delhi, and it gives us a very good snapshot of what the rural community is actually thinking. To be very honest, their aspirational structures right now are far more compatible with the lower middle income consuming group. And I think if you want to know the answer of that, that's one word, that's YouTube. I think YouTube has changed predominantly the way in which farmers, kids of farmers, everyone is perceiving what they want. And I think at that very point, their idea of progress and image of progress is resonating strongly with what the urban class is realizing is a mistake. So it's interesting, right? On one hand, which is the point that I think Randa was saying, that what you want to do is bring the conversation back to the lifestyle that the rural population is so accustomed to. But then the future group of that particular demographic base is very clear that we don't want the kind of lifestyle which you are kind of preaching to us that we should be adopting. So what I want to look at here, and I think as your own individual experiences, see, the state has proved how inefficient it is in its ability to guide change. Let me put it this way. And I'm talking about the Indian state, if you want to look at it as an example. Predominantly, most change in India has happened through social movements, social organizations, and I think the business community has played an active role in providing the capital when it felt, to be very honest, and it felt that there was a sense of a value to be derived from, because if the society wants a change and the business enterprise sees as a possibility, of course, it goes in the business interest as well. In the state interest, we don't really see that conversation happening, barring a very few state municipalities or some certain groups down south of India, maybe to a certain extent, the east of India. But apart from that, at an overarching level, we don't really see the state bringing that kind of change. So if it's not the state, and it has to be largely, let's say, the civil society or the private sector, and we had this extensive conversation with members of the civil society in the panel 1. Panel 2, with this, the idea was to get the private sector's voice. That is to say, well, are we moving towards a very different idea of corporations' own value? That is, are we moving towards a purpose-driven value for a corporation to adopt, which is very different to, let's say, what 50 years ago, Milton Friedman argued for, that the only role for a corporation is to maximize shareholder value, that is shareholder value of the shares that one is having. Are we now moving towards a stakeholder value-based corporation? That is what I think I would probably urge and provoke you guys to, I think, a little bit think about in that sense, that stakeholdership includes not only the producer, the consumer, but the environment as one of the stakeholders. Once you change the way who your stakeholders are, I think that's something which now is being expected normatively. I think the silent voice in the room is that there is an expectation of the private sector to do that, right? You know the technology, you've got the team, you can do it. So I want to kind of ask you a little bit on, from the changing image of progress, whether is there a case for a more purpose-driven corporation to be looked upon in maximizing not shareholder value, but stakeholder value? And finally, just to look at this, how is the pandemic itself, just changed everything around in the way we were having these conversations before? For a start, we are no longer having it in our own, we can't feel each other, the energy of, you can do it now in very different ways. But what has it done is it's enforcing us to think. It's almost coercive thinking by, a voice which is telling you, you need to restructure, you need to reorient. And I wanted to know how startups, particularly new organizations, given the fact that they're really hammered and put back at the hill, the banking sector doesn't look that great, to be very honest. So how do you see acclimatizing yourself to that change?
I can go first.
Sure.
So, Dipanshu, actually, these are some really thought-provoking questions and, things that we often think about in the organization, right? The private sectors essentially completely agree. I don't think it's, if I was to use these words, I don't think it's cool to just be like a shareholder, like a profit-making organization anymore. I think if you're not an organization that's not putting your customers, not putting basic values of sustainability of where the food, I'm just going to take our example in this case, or even if we were to take any other organization, anyone that works in social impact, any organization that works in social impact, if they are not able to really put forth that, okay, this is what our whole system, or a transparent system of working is, I think they're sort of just looked down upon by other organizations as well as consumers. And also, I think what we're seeing in India is just a start of that. I think it is a really, while a lot of organizations have been in this space for a while, I think we are unfortunately, the startup ecosystem is very impacted by the West here. And that culture has slowly started coming into the ecosystem of India as well. And now we're starting to see, more and more organizations, like I mentioned earlier as well, creating their mission and vision over, okay, what they want to impact. So whatever, it might be a for-profit business, but they have some sort of a hybrid model attached to themselves where they want to uplift the farmers, or they want to uplift the artisans that they work with, whose products that they are selling, and they're creating this full value chain. So I think that it is moving to a stakeholder from shareholder for sure. I do think it's slightly early to say whether this is what the way forward is going to be, because when I see it, yes, this is the way forward it should be. But I feel there is still a lot more work that needs to happen in this space for it to be more genuine and authentic. So I think there are organizations and there's a lot of work happening in this space, but how is someone really measuring that impact of the change? I think that's something that's not really happening, and that needs to start happening. Yeah, I think that's my bit on the shareholder stakeholder. And if you could just repeat the second part, and I will get to what you wanted to ask, I could address that as well.
No, I mean, on the second part was this idea of looking at how and to what extent the pandemic has made as a as an entity of your own, to be able to be forced into thinking,
Yeah.
right, and thinking about doing things differently. That's definitely one of those things. And how are you having those? I mean, of course, you don't need to share details, but how are you having those conversations internally?
Yeah.
Like, how does the work culture change, in the sense that when you're talking about sustainability, it's more than consumption production, it's about the work ethic. I mean, I have for long felt it is the conduct of the individuals within the corporation that predominantly define what kind of consciousness you're creating in the consumer's mind. And given the fact now, a lot of things are online, the business is happening in a certain manner. There's not much of influence that you can have on your consumer's mind, rather than doing it online in the ways you can.
Yeah.
How's that changing? I mean, for every.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the organization impacted in the pandemic, of course, I mean, being in the essential business, the need and it was the need of the hour. So we started acquiring a lot more, but at the same time, we had to overnight act on, okay, moving remote, running a warehouse, which predominantly is a factory, reducing the number of people in the office. So there were a lot of changes that we had to, adapt to. We sort of, like, from an organization culture perspective, we sort of lost track of, like, okay, what are normal working hours? Everybody was just working 7 days a week, always on a work call. But I think it also gave the organization a good sort of a sense of that, sure, this is a difficult situation, but we are in the space of providing food and a necessity. We need to ensure somehow or the other that our customers are taking all the precautions, customers are receiving the product that they want. For the longest time, there were delays in getting produce from the farmers, etc. So, as a business entity, just because of the nature of the work that we are in, we weren't affected that badly. It was only, like, a lot of things happened very positively for us. What we were able to put in structure was to just take moments, within our organization, within our team members, to just reflect on how our change of work, like, change, or just a change in lifestyle of just being in home all the time impacted us. And we started having those conversations, how we were personally consuming, how we wanted to communicate to our customers about the way they were consuming. We had to put in play, there was a lot of bulk ordering and excessive ordering that started happening at the beginning of the lockdown. We had to, put our foot down and say, what every customer is only allowed 2 kgs of, category wise, 2 kgs of a certain product. We're not going to allow bulk purchases. So there were a lot of things that made us reflect that on, okay, what is leading to this sort of behavior? Why are customers suddenly panic buying? And we internally had multiple conversations about that, to be able to create structures that will help us deliver food to people and to everybody who needs it, so we don't go out of stock. So I think it just made us a bit more cautious, and it made us a bit more mindful of the way we were behaving. I think every time we communicate to the customer, every touch point that was with the customer for communicating about the brand, about the products, I think we just made it very, it's always been about that we care and we are here to take care of you, but we made it more that you can rely on us and we're going to, no matter what, bring you your produce to you. So I think that collectively changed in the organization, and I saw it amongst each and every team member, the drive to want to do something for people, which was really great. if that answers your question.
So like if it was for me, so how I see it, there of course there are a lot of points that you have given us, Devanshu, to ponder upon, and the conversation for the same can go on for a long time. But it is very interesting about how it was mentioned, about how the aspirations have changed, and from the old, at least till 4 or 5 decades back, how it was about supposed to be about roti, kapda, and makan, and now it has changed to internet. I think that is a critical shift that has taken place, especially in the rural areas. So I think that is one of the significant development. And as for the corona crisis, so it has of course given us a lot to think about, and how the business as usual approach was disrupted. And now more people have turned to online because they have realized how just focusing on one area can be problematic in case of any unforeseen circumstances. So of course, the corona pandemic has given us a lot to think about, and people are going, the online way, and they are they are doing a lot of introspection. They are creating dialogues. So these things are definitely taking place. And it is very interesting about the thing you mentioned about how the stakeholder involvement, and more stakeholders need to be brought into the equation, because earlier it was about the cost minimization and profit maximization. And I think that has definitely changed, because for those who have flouted the norms, it has reflected very badly. I mean, if we say it was an example of the Volkswagen, in which because of that the test results that had come out in the public domain, I think they had taken a severe hit about how the damage was being done to the environment. So of course people have become more conscious about the products that they are consuming, and what kind of consumer is the goods that they are consuming. So I think a lot of dynamism is there, and definitely the changes taking place. And many a times, because being on the optimistic side of things, many changes are taking place in the positive direction. So let's see how things turn out.
Yeah, and I think I'm just going to jump on just a quick point that was made that I thought was really important. At least from my point of view of it's an entrepreneurship center at JGU. How do we build entrepreneurs and new ventures that take sustainability or consciousness from the get-go? And what we're running into, and I think it's just globally, it's exactly what Akansha said, Devanshu mentioned, this idea of impact. What is it exactly? What impact? How much? Are you creating a venture where the social, environmental consciousness is built into the system? Are you running a venture where it'll be not built into the system, but then it'll be like a Tom situation, right? You're giving one pair of shoes to someone that needs it. So there's all these different things, but yeah, how do you measure it? And what exactly is measured is the tricky part. What we're trying to do at Startup JGU is just instill, number one, the consciousness of what you have involved in your venture, right? So it's like, if, who are your employees, right? How many of them are women? How many of them are like the sole bread earners? What does that mean? Are you helping students, are you helping people out of poverty? Are you helping children go to school? So starting looking internally at what are the, different impacts that you're having at your system or in your idea. And, it depends on how far along they are. And then, so the students or the new entrepreneurs are understanding what we're talking about when we're saying, okay, you're providing livelihood, you're providing education, or, you need to look at, okay, more sustainable packaging, all those sorts of things. Because what does it mean if you have that, right? And where does the packaging go? How does it, how does it decompose? Where does it decompose? All these sorts of things. And I think globally, we haven't figured it out yet, the correct ways to measure. And I think that's the challenge for all of us, is to figure out these measurement tools. And especially in a context in India, it's different where, in the West, there's not such a dramatic income inequality as there is here. So, one woman getting additional livelihood can be game changing here for, if they stay in the same economic spot or they move up, or the children be able to get more educated, versus in the US or the West, where the social impact is almost looked at, outside of the system. and kind of has to be brought in, while there's a lot of social impact that can happen right within our systems, whether it's the farmers or the artisans, etc.
Okay. So Akanksha, would you like to take it up or?
No, I actually completely agree with what just Ronita said. I think it's pretty much on the same lines of what I have been thinking in terms of what is it that you're really going after, right? Like when you're setting up a social impact organization or an organization that has consciousness instilled in it, is it just the product, or is it the whole chain that you're creating, and then you're actually creating impact at the producer level or at the person who's actually manufacturing it? So I think these are very important things for anyone to think about, anyone who's starting a business with a social impact in their mind to think about, because there are multiple routes that they can take, and there's not every organization can do everything. So I think it's important to identify what is it that particular organization can do well, and then collaborate with all the other key stakeholders in the space to increase the impact of what they're trying to do. So they might be producing something and delivering it, but then they can collaborate with somebody else to make sure the farmer level impact or the rural level impact of it is something else. So I think it needs to be more thought through. I think just the trend that I've started to see in this space is more that just the labels that just say that, hey, we are socially conscious, this is chemical free, but what does that truly mean? I think that's really important for organizations and even consumers to start questioning that, is this something that I really want to buy? And what is this? I think going back to my initial point, that what is this messaging trying to really do to me? And what does that socially conscious, sustainable product really mean? I think it's really important for organizations to start defining that better.
Right. So, and the triple bottom line focus needs to be there of the social, environmental, and then the economic, parameters, that how the benefit can be go on to the larger society. So a lot of things are there, and of course the conversation is evolving, things are taking place, and as was mentioned about by Ronita, the parameters to measure the impact, they are missing. That is true, and we actually need a holistic, end-to-end, well thought out, how can the benefits actually be realized, true benefits which are inclusive and even equity. So all these aspects need to be ingrained. So there are of course some things that have taken place, but of course the parameters for the same to measure it are missing. And a few tangential interesting developments that have taken place, I think they are about impact investment and the social stock exchange that I think Indian government has came up with to increase the impact. If the organizations are out there and they are creating some positive impact, I think some of these things are moving in the right direction with as I mentioned, about social stock exchange and impact investment. And of course the Indian culture about philanthropy. I mean, some of the statistics do say that Indians are among the, India as a nation, as a citizen, and there's a psyche that is there. There is a lot of philanthropy and the donating activity that takes place. So I think a lot of things can move in the positive direction.
Just on that note, I mean, I'll just probably close on that, and because we have another session, and Ronita would take the last few minutes to discuss and bring this to a close. I mean, this has been fascinating. Just, I mean, on the question of measurement, I don't think it's a problem of metrics per se. If you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, we have the metrics there. There are more than 150 metrics to look at where and how things are moving. At least, I mean, we can debate on whether a certain parameter gives you a good idea of what is happening. But if you look at most of the conversation, at least you get a good direction if you're moving towards a more progressive space or not. And I think the question there seems to be largely of two things. And I think that has been brought out very well in the entire conversation that happened, that there is somewhere, an implicit breakdown of trust. And when I say trust, I mean a kind of trust where what we're seeing right now, that in the civic consciousness of people, as an individual, I am rather willing to see and trust the virtual network and platform that gives me the information on what's good for me, as against an individual who may be talking in my interests collectively, like, and trying to get things in order. And that's really causing that kind of divergence. So Kancha mentioned so many times the need for more cooperation as a way of moving forward. But if you have a conscious attempt by individuals to distance themselves and say, well, okay, we know what we are doing, let's keep going at it because we have a clearer idea. Given the fact you have so much of information overload that you feel that you're operationally you're fine with the decisions you're taking. Unfortunately speaking, these are the individuals who have access to most capital at this point, right? So cooperation amongst those who are coming in new, I think that's fascinating. But how do you kind of bring in this quotient of trust, which can then allow an intent to not only measure, but also execute what your intent is?
Completely agree with you, Dipanshu, there. I think trust is the biggest thing. That's what I think will define the success of any organization that's coming in this space, and also with how much authenticity are they able to show their processes. I think. I mean, for me, that's honestly the biggest thing, that if I am consuming something, do I really trust it? And do I really, it's not just from a personal perspective, but do I really trust the process that they are talking about? Do I trust that the whole thing that we have created, do I trust that particular thing? I think, of course, and it's also very interesting that you said that, it's also like most people are consuming from themselves and how they make it makes them feel. And then it's the second fit. Okay, I feel good about this. It will make me better. And also it will make the environment better. So I think it's quite very interesting things for me to think about, at least, and go back with.
Okay, I think, I think we can just keep going. Oh, sorry, Subha, do you want to add anything?
No, nothing in particular.
Are you sure?
No.
All right. Well, I think that we could just keep going for hours on this topic. So I want to say thank you very much to both of you. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I do think, collaboration is going to be key, especially without additional kind of, whether it's top-down support, to make, influence, persuade consumers to take better decisions, to link up supply chains, to link up and educate, those who are expecting to, also be the producers in this. I think now I'll just hand it over to Sanskrita or Tamanna to close out. Thank you both very much. I could listen to you guys talk all day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you everybody for showing up. I see panelists, Akanksha ma'am and Sir Shabab. Also a very, very warm thank you to Professor Ronita for engaging with our panelists in such an effective and productive manner. And it was an honor listening to everybody, and some very, very important points were raised, especially because you've been working in the field and you've practiced in the field. So you're at the forefront of these issues around consumer sustainability. So it was extremely engaging, and the team really benefited from this discussion. So again, a heartfelt gratitude to everybody. Thank you, Professor Dipanshu, for helping us organize and helping us throughout for this panel discussion. So thank you everybody for your presence and for your contributions. Sanskrita, would you like to add something?
No, yeah, I would also like to thank you all for your presence and your insightful expertise on the topic that we have discussed today. It was definitely very helpful for us to, know about the field. And yeah, with this, I bid you all a very warm good evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys. Stay connected. Please take care. All right. Thank you.